Welcome to the Muscle Building Mastery podcast, where guys that want to build muscle come to learn how to do it properly. We understand that there's more to building muscle than mindlessly throwing weights around and chugging mass gainer shakes. We're not interested in quick fixes or anabolic assistance. We're interested in mastering the art, science and skill set required to stack on real muscle and strength. My name's Andy Clements, and for the last 12 years I've devoted my life to figuring out how guys like us who don't have amazing genetics, don't have 5 hours a day to spend in the gym, and don't want to take steroids as a shortcut can build insane amounts of muscle and strength in weeks and months, not years and decades. This podcast is the result of all the lessons I've learned along the way, and it will give you the blueprint to building more muscle in less time. To get you started, head to www.musclebuildingmastery.net to download your free 6-week workout plan. Hey, what is going on, you guys? This is Andy Clements. Welcome back to the Muscle Building Mastery podcast. I'm super excited to have you guys here today because today we're going to talk about a really interesting concept that I have coined a specific name for, a framework that I've kind of formulated myself, but it's based on a lot of other people's and a lot more smart people's work than I am. But what I want to talk to you about is the muscular functional training framework. Now, as far as I'm aware, I don't think anybody else has sort of coined that. It's not like trademarked or anything, but I don't think anybody else has coined that sort of term for what I'm going to describe here. I know that other people obviously use similar approaches, but like this is the framework. This is how I think of it, and this is how I teach it. And the muscular functional training framework is one of the most fundamental key components that I teach to my sort of high-paying one-on-one clients to help them to understand the concept of training to grow muscle, and B, actually execute properly the act of training to grow muscle, rather than just throwing weights around. So it's essentially my way of formulating and putting into practice a smarter way of training. So, I'm going to say this again, it's called the Muscular Functional Training Framework, right? Now, this is born a little bit tongue-in-cheek out of the traditional functional training movement that, certain areas of the fitness industry have taken on as their own, right? And I'm not against functional training. Like, functional training in the truest sense of the word, I think is very useful and has very many applications in general life. But the thing that I do have a problem with is doing all sorts of ridiculous flapping around like certain people tend to do, like how many times can you get your chin to a bar, and calling it functional training and saying, well, it's okay, I can flop around like a fish out of water because I'm training functionally. Like that does my head in. So that, it was kind of born out of an annoyance for those kinds of methods of training. I'm not going to say those kinds of people. I think it's probably a bit much to be saying I'm getting annoyed at the people, but that kind of the thought process really kind of almost irritated me. So that's where I went back to the drawing board. I was like, okay, how can I counter this and speak to people who want to build muscle in a way that kind of opposes that line of thinking, that whole functional training. So that's the muscular functional training. That's where the name comes from. Okay, now, before I dive into exactly what this is, let me tell you the backstory just for a couple of seconds here. I'm not going to take too long, but I just want to give you some context about where I was in my life when I started thinking about these kinds of things. Because I had a bit of a grasp of training programs, right? I had a bit of a grasp of what training was about as a whole. I kind of knew how to build a program. I kind of knew how to follow a program. I'd got some results. I wasn't ridiculously skinny, but I couldn't seem to bring up my physique as a whole. I kept developing glaring weaknesses. I kept getting injuries, and I ended up with quite an imbalanced physique. So I'm just a little bit of coffee there. Sorry about that. I ended up with glaring weaknesses. Specifically, my personal weaknesses were on my shoulders and my lats, and probably my hamstrings and glutes as well. My posterior chain was really, really weak. I guess that was from years of t-shirt training, right? So years and years when I'd started, the first 4 years, I was just smashing my chest and my biceps all the time, and my shoulders. So I ended up with unstable shoulders, and weak back of the body and stuff like that. So I was in a bit of a tight spot because I needed something to help me sort of balance my physique and bring it up to look a little bit more aesthetic and stop me getting injured every 5 minutes, because I was like spending so much time and money at the chiropractors, it was unreal. Like, and I was getting fixed every time I went to the chiropractors, but then within a few weeks there'd be something else wrong with me. So I wanted some way of training that actually worked a little bit better, but also kept me injury free. And not only this, but like at the time I was starting my PT career, I wasn't like an experienced personal trainer or experienced coach, but I was starting to delve into the world of coaching other people, and that came with its own set of responsibilities. Now, other people were coming up to me and they were asking my advice on weak body parts, because what I was trying to do, and what I've been trying to do ever since really, is kind of position myself as a muscle building expert, like a muscle building authority, right? And the guy that people can come to if they want to learn how to build muscle. And that's why this podcast is called Muscle Building Mastery. That's why I talk about muscle building on this podcast every single day. So this process was starting. People were starting to then come up to me and ask my advice on weak body parts, and my only answer for them up to that point, because it was the only thing I'd figured out for myself, was that weak body parts just have to be trained more. That was my only answer. Now, frequency does have its place, all right, but on its own, all the amount of times I was training a certain body part in a week was making me injured. Like, I was just getting more and more injuries, and I wasn't able to overcome these weak, glaring body parts just by using more volume alone. So this was obviously really, really frustrating, and like I mentioned earlier, I was spending a lot of time and money at the chiropractors, and my chiropractor is called Aidan, and he's one of the smartest, if not the smartest guy, definitely when it comes to the body and anything physical and physiological that I've ever met and probably will ever meet. He's like incredible wealth of knowledge and a really, really nice guy. And on one of the trips to sort another injury out, he kind of just like floated an idea my way that I should probably start looking a little bit more closely at how I was training rather than just how much, because I was talking about weak body parts and stuff like that, and I was like, this is what I'm trying to do, and I was asking his advice, and he sort of floated the idea that rather than just training more, because training more is one option, but I'm already doing that and that's not working. So rather than just training more, why don't I start zeroing in on how the actual execution of how I am training, okay? So this didn't make that much sense to me, because I thought I'd already learned, I thought that good form was something that you learned early on when you started training, and then you forgot about it because you already knew it. I didn't think that anything to do with form or technique really mattered that much. Once you knew it, obviously I wasn't stupid. I didn't think I knew that you shouldn't be swinging around, with like making a dumbbell twirl around your head or whatever. I knew that you should have good form, quote unquote, but I didn't know that it mattered that much. But I trusted my chiropractor. I just thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. So I began sort of doing research, but all I could sort of find online was some made up exercises, the stuff I was already doing, training more often, and I ended up feeling a little bit dejected with the whole thing and giving up, right? So I started resigning myself at that point to a life of constant injuries, weak body parts, and I ended up telling myself maybe I just have a shitty body, maybe I can't overcome these weak body parts, maybe it's not that's not maybe I've just got a shitty body, maybe I've got bad genetics, all those kind of things. There's all those classic things that you think of when you're on the verge of giving up, basically. So around this time, I was browsing through the videos online, right? I was just watching training videos, just more for entertainment than anything else. I was watching people working out, maybe motivational stuff, to try and get me hyped for another workout. And I came across a guy called Ben Pakulski. Now, if you've not heard of Ben Pakulski, he nowadays he's more into the personal development space and stuff like that. But back in 2014, 2015, when I was getting into this stuff, he was an IFBB pro bodybuilder, and he was an insane wealth of knowledge. And I don't know him personally. I'm not claiming to be his best friend or anything, but he put a lot of stuff online, and I came across him online. I came across a video of him online. And I kind of knew instantly from watching him that he wasn't full of shit, like most of the online gurus are full of shit, right? So ended up watching this video, and like a lot of what he was saying was making a lot of sense. And so I went through like every video he'd ever made, and ended up buying every program he'd ever put out, and like following all his emails and following like everything he was putting out. I was like absorbing like a sponge. I was taking it all in, and I was trying it out in the gym. And then I ended up going to seminars of his. Like he came to the UK, he came to Nottingham to Mark Coles's gym, to M10, and I went to his seminar there, and I went to Body Power, and I met him at Body Power, and I listened to him speak, and I watched him train and stuff like that. And I ended up going quite deep on his content, and I thought, this is some really good stuff. And his angle, basically, the reason that it hooked me in was because it was kind of like the missing link between what my chiropractor was telling me to do and what I was actually unable to figure out. So his angle was all around the execution of movements, right? So rather than just the whole good form that I thought you just kind of learn when you first started training because somebody showed you or you learned on the internet or whatever, then you forgot about it. Rather than just that, he placed huge amounts of emphasis on training with precision accuracy. And every single time you went in the gym, that was at the forefront of your mind. It wasn't just, oh, I already know this, so I'm just going to do this bicep curl without thinking about it. It was like training was as much of a mental activity as it was a physical activity, because the mind and the body were equally involved. Now, I've mentioned that sort of mind-body connection with training on previous episodes in different ways, like mental rehearsal, for example, which is, it's like maybe a layer deeper than visualization, where you think and you feel your way into a set before you do it, and that's going to help you to generate more intensity in the set, which is an interesting episode, I think. Anyway, just my opinion. So if you're interested in that, then go back and listen to the mental rehearsal episode. But for the purposes of this episode, the mind and the body are involved in the actual execution of movements, or the way that you perform the movement, the exercise. So in a world where everyone's focus was on throwing weights around on their external world, on their external environment, i.e. the dumbbell, the barbell, the machine, whatever, like the act of pushing something away from you, and you're pushing up in a push-up or a squat or whatever, his whole sort of angle, well, one of his angles was highlighting that muscle building was an internal game, not an external one. It was about going within, right? It was about contracting muscle. It wasn't about moving weight. So one of his famous quotes, or at least in my mind, it's one thing he said that never ever left me, was that it takes more than the mindless moving of weight to build muscle. So let me say that one more time. It takes more than the mindless moving of weight to build muscle. So that's one of the really powerful things that he said that really, really stuck with me. Now, using Ben Pakulski's influence, after I'd gone to his seminars and I'd lapped up his, content online and his videos and his programs, and I'd done all the stuff, and I'd started to figure out what he was saying on a slightly deeper level. I started to develop these ideas into my framework, and now I'm going to be clear in that I'm not claiming responsibility for discovering anything within this framework. I've just packaged up the things that I've figured out and I've learned from smarter people, and I've been able to condense them into something that I find the easiest way to consume it, and I find the easiest way to teach it to other people as well. And what I'm calling that is the Muscular Functional Training Framework, which is the title of this episode. So the Muscular Functional Training Framework. Now, this was born out of, if the game was an internal contraction of muscle instead of an external moving of weight, then it would make sense, logical sense, to study each and every muscle's function and train accordingly. Now, again, this is not something that I thought up. This is, again, something that Ben Pakulski used to talk about a lot, something Mark Colles used to talk about, something that, lots and lots and lots of the best minds in the fitness industry and in the world would talk about a lot. Like, it's no secret that every single muscle in our body has a function. But a lot of people that are first starting out don't tend to consider that very much. That contrary to popular belief, muscles aren't there just for vanity. They're there to perform specific functions, right? So if you want to train your quads or the muscles of your upper thigh, then you need to bear in mind that the function of the quads are twofold. They are first to extend the knee, which is kind of like what you do on a leg extension. So you extend your knee and you straighten your leg, and that's the function of the quads. And the second is to flex the hip. So if we can combine both of those functions, for example, in a squat where we flex the hip on the bottom and then we extend the knee and extend the hip at the top, then we're going to have a good chance of growing the quads, basically, because we're working the muscle under load through its function. And there's a ton of different examples I can give you for that. For let's say another lower body one, the calf, right? So if you're trying to grow your calves, which I know is one that lots of us struggle with. I struggle with it for years, like being able to actually feel my calf when I trained it and stuff like that. But if you want to grow your calves, then you've got to bear in mind that the function of the calf is to, in simplified terms, extend the ankle, or in more specific and technical terms, to plantar flex the foot or from the ankle joint, right? So a contracted calf points the toe, basically. So if you point your big toe and you press through the ball of your foot, that's contracting your calf. Now, if you pull the big toe up and you squeeze the front of your shin, the tibialis anterior muscle on the front of your shin, that's going to lengthen the calf, okay? So the function of the calf is to take your foot from a dorsiflex position, or a toes pulled up, to a plantar flex position, which is toes pointed down. Does that make sense? So that's a quick example of what I mean when I talk about muscular functions, right? Every muscle has a specific purpose and they enable movement. So we've got 3 specific steps to the muscular functional training framework, and this is kind of the way that I teach it to my clients, and then we go through each particular one in the gym together, or online, or whatever we do, and we sort of teach an understanding of how to train in accordance to each muscle's function, because once you know the function of each muscle, figuring exercises out is a much simpler game, right? So here's step 1. Step 1 is know the function of the muscle you're training, right? So, for example, the biceps flex the elbow, yeah? Now, I'm not expecting you to know every single function of every muscle in your body from a 20-minute podcast, however long this is. I'll probably be coming out with like more in-depth programs and things like that to teach this framework in a more practical way, and in like a workshop fashion where you can actually get something tangible out of it. But for the purposes of this podcast, I want you to understand the framework. So step 1 is to understand the function of the muscle that you're training. So like I say, for example, the biceps flex the elbow. So that means that in order to contract the biceps, you must flex the elbow joint. You must close the gap between the forearm and the upper arm, right? So that's the function of the biceps. So we'll stick with the biceps example for now. Step 2 of this framework is to create stability in the body so none of the surrounding or supporting muscles can overcompensate for the target muscle. Let me say that one more time. Create stability in the body so none of the surrounding or supporting muscles can overcompensate for the target muscle. So by creating stability, we are eliminating the surrounding muscles from being able to jump in and help. Because what happens when you start, for example, if you start trying to lift too much weight on a bicep curl, what's the first thing that's going to happen when you can't lift that much weight? The surrounding and supporting muscles are going to jump in and help you. And how does that look externally? That looks like swinging from the back, swinging from the hips. It looks like coming up onto your tippy toes. It looks like your shoulders moving around and swinging around. And that's, we think of it as swinging, and it is swinging. And it's poor form and all the rest of it. But the reason that's happening is because the biceps aren't strong enough to lift the weight. So but your mind, you're mentally determined to get that weight up. So because your mind's determined to do something, your body responds. And your body responds by, there's a dog outside and he's a good boy, I think. Sorry about that. But yeah, your body responds to your mind being determined to get that weight up by utilizing every muscle it possibly can to help you perform what you think is the goal, which is getting the weight up. But the goal isn't to get the weight up. The goal is to contract the biceps. So if you understand that's the goal, then all of a sudden the weight becomes less important, and it's like, how can I fully contract my biceps, right? And then this weight is then secondary. So when you've figured out you can fully contract your biceps and you've created stability through the body by stabilizing the shoulders, for example, or doing it seated so your back can't swing rather than standing, or pressing your shoulder blades against the wall, or whatever it is that you need to do to create stability. And then you're using a light enough weight to be able to fully contract the biceps and nothing else, then you're in a much better position. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't then add load on top of that, right? So then you work your way up in that position with that perfect form. You end up working your way to pushing more and more weight onto that exercise, but you don't ever lose working the muscle through its function. And you don't ever lose the stability. They're the first two steps. The third step I've kind of alluded to already, and the third step is just to work the target muscle through its intended function under load, and load means weight, okay? So like I say, once you've got the function nailed down, and once you know that you're working the muscle through its function, once you've created stability in the body, and you've stabilized the surrounding joints and the surrounding muscles and surrounding bones, and you can be sure that you are just working that muscle. The final step is to add load, right? That's not the first step. Notice that I didn't say the first step is to lift heavy. I said the first step is to work the muscle through its intended function. This is the formula of muscular functional training. The first step is to work the muscle through its intended function. The second step is to create stability in the body so that no other muscles can jump in and steal tension away from your target muscle. The third step, and the last step after you've done everything else, is then to add load. So what I'm not saying is, I'm not saying it's bad to lift heavy, but I'm also not saying begin with lifting heavy. I'm saying get your form right first. Get your function right first. Get your stability right first. Once that's nailed, then lift heavy, right? And if you can lift heavy without losing the stability, without losing the function, your physique will look night and day difference to somebody who simply goes in and throws weights around as heavy as possible, because you will be doing heavy lifting with perfect precision, accuracy, or as close to as possible, as opposed to somebody who's just using momentum, who's using inertia, who's using the stretch reflex of the muscle, who's bouncing it through the joints rather than the muscle. You will be at a much higher level in terms of your training, and therefore you'll be a much higher level in terms of your physique. So if you respect this framework and you train accordingly, then you'll put much more tension through the target muscle and you'll make it grow. So I hope that made sense. I hope that was a useful insight into muscular functional training. Like I said, it's like I'm putting lots of disclaimers on this because I don't want people to think that I've invented muscular function, or invented training accurately, just because I'm calling it a framework. It's just the way I package this information up and give it to people, and I think it's quite a nice way to start talking and thinking about this in terms of a framework. So if you could sort of understand the 3 steps there, knowing the function, creating stability, and then applying load, then apply that in the gym, you will get much better results than if you just jump in there and start lifting heavy and just think that you've got all the form thing figured out already, right? Like I used to. So I hope that made sense, guys. If you want a free workout plan, don't forget you can head to www.musclebuildingmastery.net and you can download your free 6-week workout plan now. And other than that, I hope that was valuable. If you was, please share it with a friend that could use this kind of information, and jump on, if you're on Apple or iTunes or Spotify or wherever, jump on and give me a quick review and let me know what you think, and let's see if we can convince the major platforms out there this stuff is worth listening to. So I hope that was useful, guys, and I will speak to you next time on the Muscle Building Mastery podcast. If you're ready to stop wasting time in the gym and start mastering the skill of muscle building, go check out www.musclebuildingmastery.net to download your free 6-week muscle building workout plan. I have specifically formulated this workout plan to take you through the 3 stages of mastering your body, layering on a more advanced training methodology each week as you progress. That means that regardless of where you are with your training right now, this plan will push you forward and help you stack on more muscle and strength in just 6 weeks. So head to www.musclebuildingmastery.net now to grab your free 6-week workout plan.